Here we're going to look at using the SDL replicate commands to duplicate FPGA banks. The first thing we're going to look at is the SmartFrac report. And SmartFrac found the generic I/O banks. It found 6 generic I/O banks, 13 through 35, and it detected 1 transceiver bank. So now that we know what SmartFrac found for us, it found the dedicated I/O banks, the 6 generic I/O banks, and the transceiver banks. Let's open the SDL Editor to see how it broke them up into banks for us. And we can see here we have FPGA generic I/O banks 13, and here's the end of that symbol. So here's the start of symbol and end of symbol. On the left it put all the power pins, and on the right it used this fancy regular expression to match all the I/O pins for that bank. And now we can see it did the same for 14, 15, 16, 34, and 35. So what if we didn't like how it laid these things out? And sometimes there's more information between these things. In this case, there's 6 I/O banks, and we'd have to go touch each one of these 6 I/O banks to fix it. In some FPGAs, there might be 20 I/O banks, and SmartFrac will build it for us, but we have to go and touch all 20 I/O banks if we want to make a change. So instead, what we want to do is use a replicate loop. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this block and we're going to replicate it, and whenever we see the underscore 13 in here, here, and here, we're going to replace it with the bank number. And we can see that SmartFrac here tells us what it found: 13, 14, 15, 16, 34, and 35. So how do we do that? We click here and click here. So we mark the symbol that we want to replicate, and then we go to this button, which is the add preprocessor statement. We'll go into there, and we're going to go find the replicate loop. So we're going to find replicate, and you can see it, since SmartFrac ran, it actually added this text for us. And then if we go down, it's going to show us some sample replicate commands. And what we want is this replicate. And then we're going to say underscore 13. So anywhere we see underscore 13, we're going to replace it with underscore and then those bank numbers. And we have to include 13 in this. And this should be an equals. Okay, and then what we're going to say is wrap the selection. So it's going to put a replicate up here, and it's going to put an end replicate down here. So we wrap the selection. And then now that means it's going to, the first time through, it's going to find underscore 13. It's going to replace it with underscore 13. The second time through, it'll replace it with underscore 14. And that underscore 13 will become underscore 14, and that one will become. And then when we get to 16, it'll replace those with 16. So that means we can delete the 14, 15, 16, 34, and 35. So I'm going to mark those, and I'm going to use the cut to delete that. Now I'm going to save this as a new file. I'll call it top symbols with replicate.sdl. And we'll save it. And now it's going to tell me that the newly named SDL file is different than the one in Part Builder. So do we want to use the new one? And we say yes. And that changes the symbol description file. Now what we can do, we can use this special open expanded STL. And all this will do is let Part Builder replicate this loop and show us what it's going to create. So if I open the expanded STL, we first get a warning saying, hey, this is an expanded file, don't touch this. But you can, it's good to look at. And then we'll slide here. So part of the expansion was to take this include file and stick it in there. Okay, so we see that. So this is the flattened version of that file. And now we can see we got banks 13, 14, 15, 16, 34, 35, 36. And you can see that it's exactly the same for each one. So let me close that, and let me add a spacer in here. Not that it'll do anything, but let's add a left equals spacer. Okay, and then let's rerun that. Let's save it, and then let's rerun the open expanded SDL. So by adding one spacer, now every bank has that spacer in it too, from 34 to 36. So you can see if we want to make a change and edit, we only have to do it once, and Part Builder will expand it for us for each one of these banks in this list. So if you have an FPGA with 25 banks, all you have to do is change this statement and you can add as many banks as you want. The transceiver banks are even more fun because sometimes it's not set up quite right. So in this case we only have one, but we could still do a replicate loop around it. And then we can reuse it for a device that has more than one replicate loop. So let's do that. We'll go here. We're going to go to the replicate loop, and we see it's only got 216. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a tick replicate. We can copy this. And we're going to say 216 or under 216 equals under 216. And we'll say wrap that selection. So now if we want to add something in here, so we got our MGTs on the right, our transmitters on our receivers on the left, our transmitters on the right. But let's say we want to add a balanced symbol sides in here now to separate those from the MGT ref clocks from there. And then we'll add another balanced symbol sides in here. So with this case, now if we had multiple banks, we can just say, oh, if we had a bank 116, we could put it in there. And that would duplicate those banks for us. So now I'll save this again, and we'll go look, and we're going to open the Expanded STL. And the Expanded STL, it takes out the replicate statement. So here we can see it did the same thing. It built us the transceiver bank, and now we have the balanced symbol sides in it. And if we had more banks, we would be able to reuse that. And so if we go to a bigger device in the family, this SDL becomes much more usable. And that's how you do replicate loops. Thanks for watching. Please visit us at www.cadenhance.com/downloads to download a copy of the tools and take them for a free 30-day test drive.